welcome to this week's episode of Automate It, Polymath Robotics weekly podcast that sometimes certainly never misses a week. Weekly podcast where we talk about robots, what they are, how to build them, how hard it is to build them. I, of course, am Stefan Oxmacher, CEO and co-founder of Polymath Robotics. And with me is like a Southern Californian. He's returned from a week off with a healthy glow that just screams sitting inside and in a basement for a long period of time.
That's exactly right. With a crying toddler.
How is your beach with no ocean trip?
It was so good. My wife and I have decided to staycation for the next 5 years.
The type of conclusion people only come to when they have families. As I said earlier, this is Automate It, a weekly podcast where we talk about how to build robots. And there's two main sections of this. The first is where we play a game that kind of feels a lot like founding a robotics company. And the second, we'll be talking about a subject that, might come up in the first section, might not. Depends on how the cards draw. For the game that we play, what we essentially do is we each draw a card. One of us a technology card, the other a setting or a business card. And this kind of feels a lot like when you're starting a robotics company. Like, oh, is there this technology you like? Is this technology you don't like? And this setting that you know about and whatever. And we try to spitball a really interesting or stupid idea about how to build it.
Only very serious ideas come through. Definitely.
So
all right.
This week, in terms of technology, here's one that I certainly did not recently get a pitch deck sent to me for. Robotic arms. And what settings are we going to try to use these robotic arms in?
Let's see the first one. Delivery? I think we've done that one. All right. Let's say office.
Office robotic arms.
All right. Office robotic arms.
Office robotic arms.
Because the trend in digitization of offices has led to more people using paper.
Yes.
And so you need a robot arm to rove around on the ceiling to pick up piles of paper from person per
Well, that's a robot arm and not that's a gantry crane more than it's a robot arm.
Yeah.
I think so thinking about this from what are problems in modern offices? Shuffling paperwork. Oh, actually, it's an interesting one.
The soda can thing that we talked about?
No, better than that.
All right.
So in offices of yore, there was a person who sat in the mailroom and took all of this inbound mail and sorted it out.
Yeah.
So if you might have an office floor of 30,000 square feet, box or two of mail would show up, and then you have a person go through all that mail. And this person, I don't know, they might make $50,000, $60,000 a year, maybe 40, I don't know. Sort through all that mail and then likely go around the office and deliver it to people's desks.
Yep.
And some of these mail are Amazon packages. Some of this are weird gifts from vendors who are trying to get you to respond to a desperate sales email. Some of them are spam. Some of them are handwritten letters from family members who, for some reason, saw an address of yours once and decided to send the rest of your personal correspondence to your massive office. So yeah, we need to automate away this bastion of blue collar and white collar America. How do we use robot arms to sort mail?
Yeah, so you're basically how do we beat Amazon at their own game or UPS at their own game?
In a small enough setting, that it's not a super expensive robot. We can't use conveyor belts.
Yeah,
we basically need something that you can roll in and will shuffle the mail. Maybe it shuffles it into by name or by department. And you have a bunch of stacks of here's all of Stefan's mail, here's all of Ilia's mail, and they're in this floor. So then let's say a human or the robot itself takes the mail to them.
So if it takes, so assuming the office has elevators, right? So it's flat floor.
Yep.
You have a mobile base.
Yep.
You have an arm mounted on it. So next thing you need is cameras. You need perception, right? You need to perceive what the package is, what the size of it is.
Well, I think even before we're moving, the entry point is two big bins of mail show up.
Yeah.
And the robot is in the mail room or the mail warehouse or the mail distribution center, as it's sometimes known. And they need to take this massive pile and turn it into Stefan's mail, Ilia's mail, Nicole's mail.
Yeah. So it's a box robot with enough battery power to drive up and down the office, right?
Yep.
It gets to the bin, has a camera high up enough that it can image the bin.
Yep.
And then you got the problem of segmentation. So it's got to figure out where does this letter end and the next one begins.
Envelopes tend to look a lot like envelopes.
Yeah. And they're all white.
Yep.
Or some version of cream colored. And they blend together very nicely. So, there's a big machine vision task, probably with LiDAR, maybe just with cameras, whatever. to figure out where does one box stop, where does the other end, and then
not just boxes, also just like envelopes.
Envelopes, yeah, exactly. Just pile of stuff.
So you probably have to think about like there's envelopes, there's magazines, there's manila envelopes that probably have really super important stuff, and then there's boxes of varying sizes.
Yeah. So okay. To make this a little bit more feasible, we're going to cap the box size.
Yeah.
Like it can't be 30 tons.
If it's, well, I mean, not even that. If it's a new speaker, say a new Sonos speaker.
Yeah. Like it can't be more than 10 pounds.
That it stays in the mailroom and you get a text message, you know, hey, you got a speaker.
Yeah. Go pick up your giant package.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's small enough that your robot arm can pick it up, the other problem after, even let's say you've segmented out the letter, right? The next thing to do is to plan out, how do I pick up this letter without completely rearranging the rest of the pile? Like imagine you have a pile of stuff and you reach in, you grab the thing at the bottom and you pull it out. You're just chaosing the rest of the stuff. So you got to pick what's at the top of the pile.
I mean, I suspect like having seen these boxes come into mailrooms before, they tend to be kind of already stacked up. Okay. It's not like letters going everywhere. Okay. There kind of is a logical order and pile to it.
Okay.
That might have been shaken somewhat, but like not adversarially.
Because I'm just trying to think like if a letter's edge on towards you, that is impossible.
I think like you look into this box and it's mostly flat pile of mail.
So idealized situation. Yeah. All right. So that's crazy. So then I'd probably go, instead of with a gripper, I'd probably go with a vacuum suction cup system, right? So that's strong enough to pick up anything.
And then you also don't need to do more complex planning for how to actually grip the thing.
Exactly. There's no planning involved. It's just, there's a plane, either the letter face or the box face, and you attach your suction cup to that plane and you pick it up. And that's honestly, and it's gentle enough.
How strong are those suction cup grippers? Because like let's say
10 pounds easy.
Let's say the manila envelopes could be paperwork or they could be lead. I don't know how many people are mailing boxes of lead into
that's what I'm saying.
Envelopes.
That's why I started this with like, how heavy is this thing?
Yeah.
10 pounds, easy. You can do a suction, no problem. On a reasonably sized envelope, 10 pounds, no issue. If you go beyond that, that's when suction starts to really fail. It starts to suck.
Is it like a square power law type of thing?
Something like that. Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's basically that. Yeah. Right? Like beyond a certain size, you really need to grab it rather than try to suction cup it.
So you suction cup the envelopes out. Yep. You then have to stack them in piles. So like the Stefan pile, the Ilia pile.
Yep.
What I wonder about with that is there's probably fewer spaces than there are overall people who might receive mail, but different people receive mail every day. So like I'm a really big deal. People want to mail me things all day, every day.
Binary tree.
Nobody wants to mail you anything.
I mean, that's pretty accurate.
So like occasionally you're getting a weird spam letter of like you've been pre-approved for $40,000 if you mortgage your kidneys.
Well, backstory here is our head office address used to be Stefan's house. So once every like 3 months, he comes in with this giant stack of letters and he just drops them and it's like, what's in here? And like half of it is spam. And every once in a while we get like a open immediately IRS letter that I'm like, great, this is only 2 months old.
Like 7-8 years ago, I actually got like things posted on my mailbox because like all I got at that apartment was spam.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I'm not gonna go check the mail every single day to just see garbage. So I'd wait months, and apparently that's not how other people deal it.
So okay, so what you do, I'd suggest, is you do like a binary tree sort of thing. So what you do is you say, okay, this bin has A through C people, and then this bin has D through F and whatever, right? And so you break it down that way. So you sort into a subsorted pile, and then you take that bin and you resort it. So like all the A to C's are now to Alex and to Cliff and to whoever, right? Then you go distribute those. Then you do the next set. Then you do the next set, right?
Because it take forever.
It is going to take forever. But who cares?
Every piece of mail 14
like five
times.
No, binary trees are super efficient. But yes, it's going to take like 3 or 4.
Like if it takes 2 days to mail someone something, it's going to be another 3 days till it shows up on their desk.
I mean, maybe it might take some time, but that will let you support an almost infinite amount of people in a finite set of boxes, right? You just got to keep rearranging them.
Like, why not just like lay the letters out over like the countertop in this mailroom?
And
just have a longer expanding list.
The less controlled space you have, the harder this problem gets. So like you got to control everything, right? Controlled size bins, controlled access to the elevator, controlled, like I know Stefan's desk is always here. So I'm going to pick up the bin, I'm going to drive and I'm going to drop it to this exact spot. And if his coffee cup is there, Too freaking bad. That coffee cup is ending up on the ground as I just sweep it out of the way and put my letters down, right? Like that's the way you get an MVP off the ground.
Feels a lot like Futurama when they're like doing the paperboy route and they're just like shotgunning newspapers through people's windows.
Bingo.
Yep.
Like that's the way. So actually, it's funny. Of all the crazy ideas we've discussed, this one is feasible without a crazy amount of effort.
Yeah.
Like this is actually doable.
And like it's doable. We get to replace a relatively low paid job. And it requires, I don't know what, a KUKA arm, a couple of
base.
stereo cameras, only $200,000 of hardware.
I mean, that's like, honestly, a 3 or 4 year payback period. That's not the worst robotics investment I've heard of. Seriously, a lot of these robot projects are like 8+ years payback period. Like this will beat them handily.
And we get to slow down the U.S. Postal Service, which, that they have it coming.
Yeah, Republicans will be all in our corner. Sorry, Canadian joke. I don't know if I get to say that.
All right, there we have it. So coming to you in an office park full of sadness near you, Mail Sorter 3000.
It's always got to be a 3000.
Just the tagline's like just stop coming into the mailroom already.
Stefan grew up in the 90s. Clearly, it's got to have a 3000 attached to it.
Alrighty. So there's a really interesting technology that I've bumped across a couple of times trying to sell the polymaths to the peoples called a teach and repeat. And there's a couple of folks who are selling these types of systems as quote unquote autonomy and like it works, it's good to go. And my understanding of the crux of what this is you drive down some path at some speed, steering some angles, and then the system does it all over again. And I mean, I think like one of the use cases I was talking about to someone about today was vehicles driving in a relatively rural environment. You could put a bunch of sensors on it, drive it down the path, to turn the corner, drive to the other thing, get to location 4 and go back to where it came from. And now you can go to location 4 and you just add some obstacle avoidance to lead it to come to a stop and you're good to go. Yeah. So autonomy is a solved problem. What we work on professionally is a lie, and might as well just go home.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny because stretched to the extreme, the vast majority of industrial mobile robots behave that way today.
Yeah.
Right. Like all the what's called AMRs, autonomous mobile robots in the industrial space, you teach them a very specific set of paths. You can code in some basic logic. Like when you get to this intersection, if you see A, do B, if you see C, do B, kind of stuff. So I've always conceptualized that sort of thing or teach and repeat as railroads. Okay. So you can really lay out this railroad. It'll take this railroad. But if there's something in the way of the railroad, most of the time you're hosed. Unless you have a detour path because you already have another railroad line that you've laid where it can intelligently decide.
Siding, as they call it in the railroad industry.
There you go.
I learned that by reading Atlas Shrugged, which was way too long. A lot of talk of railroads, not a lot of payoff.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to get railroaded for that comment. But yeah, so you can think of it kind of conceptually as railroads, whereas a true autonomy system is kind of like a car, where, yeah, you have to follow the rules of the road, but you can practically go anywhere you want.
But like, why is teach and repeat not enough? If you can get around, if you can control the railroads.
Yeah, I mean, railroads are great, right? Like for factories, railroads are perfect because you have complete control over what's going on. You have a railroad dispatch-esque system. But in the outdoors or in kind of less structured environments, you can't have a railroad because you're just going to get stopped constantly. There's either going to be obstacles or the path you've laid.
I mean, how much stuff actually needs to change before you can't do
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, like if it's the same path every day and like, you're going in the same, it's the same GPS coordinates. It's the same, that tree's been there for 100 years. How hard can it possibly be to just recognize that tree and keep on going? Yeah.
So let's step back a bit. So when we're talking about teach and repeat, right? You have a position. The easiest way you could do this is a GPS. If you have a really nice GPS, you gave it a series of GPS coordinates, boiled down minus our safety layer, minus our API layer. That's basically what we do, right? Like high accuracy GPS with some sensor fusion, go to these locations, great. That actually works reasonably well. Where it gets tricky is in areas where you can't use GPS, underground or other localization systems. underground or in forests or those kind of things.
Yep.
And generally, these teach and repeat systems switch to.
I know there's a major OEM in the mining space that has deployed a lot of underground autonomous robots, which is entirely teach and repeat.
Teach and repeat, and probably visual teach and repeat. Yeah. And so that's great because in those cases, especially in mines, your surroundings of your actual mine shafts change very little. You might be mining in different sites. The actual lines usually actually even have railroad track laid in some cases. So you have very fixed locations. So you know exactly if I take this tunnel, I'm going to end up the same place as I did yesterday. Some challenging work that UTIUS did, University of Toronto Autonomous Group, they did a system called VTNR version 3, Visual Teach and Repeat 3. It's even open source. People can check it out. And they're trying to apply teach and repeat to outdoor locations. The challenge there is the seasons change, the weather changes, all sorts of conditions of the stuff your actual optical system's trying to see is different.
But can you pick like what it pays attention to? Like only pay attention to the old elm tree?
Yeah, you could maybe go through and manually label these things, but at that point you're putting in so much effort to actually label these things.
It starts to look a lot like, why don't you just build autonomy?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, you've picked that maple tree, but next week it's covered in snow. Or next week it's dark instead of because you're running it at nighttime or at sunset versus daytime. Even sunrise versus sunset,
things
the
look
shadows
different at night than during the day.
Yeah. Even with floodlights.
Like my wife always tells me, I look best with a mask on. Like in a dark room is the best my face ever looks.
That is some deep personal insight I was not expecting to receive. But yeah, so visual teach and repeat or teach and repeat systems are great in general. The more fixed your environment is, the rule of thumb I've heard is that if more than roughly 30% of your features, and those features might be visual features, they might be GPS, they might be LiDAR, whatever, tape on the floor, it doesn't matter. Whatever, if 30 or more % of those features change, you're going to get lost fairly often.
So GPS itself can be kind of noisy.
Very.
How much noise can you get from a GPS to still have GPS-based teaching?
It will depend on how accurate you need to be.
Okay.
So again, kind of a rule of thumb is you can't be any more accurate than your individual sensors. You can. This is a cheat, right? You can fuse. You can use common filters. You can get more accurate, whatever. But for the vast majority of applications, if your GPS is roughly accurate to meter, being more accurate than a meter in the global sense is going to be extremely difficult. Yeah. You might get it at the start of your path. You might get it at the end of your...
And what's a good, like, RTK corrected GPS that doesn't have a cellular signal? How accurate is something like that looking like these days?
So if you don't have cell, that means you can't get cloud corrections. So you're correcting from a base station. Yeah. So you actually still have a radio signal. It's just not a cell radio signal. Those things can get down to a few centimeters. Okay. It's really accurate. Or an inch or two for the American folks out there. But so that's definitely achievable, but that's under ideal conditions. So that means your vehicle has stood still for a while to survey to start with, like half an hour. You're in an open plain. You don't have a lot of reflected signals like in a city or in a forest or those kind of cases where you get multipath from GPS. Your signal quality there, even with RTK, is going to degrade.
How badly?
A few meters, like quite bad. Yeah. And that's where, again, where teach and repeat will start to have trouble because, again, stepping back, if you haven't worked in robotics, you might think like, oh, it's a robot. It can replay things perfectly. And it can. If you give the wheel commands an exact set of turn half a quarter turn forward, then a half quarter turn reverse, whatever, it'll play them back exactly. But the real world and physics will kind of add noise, right? Again, like this,
the real world doesn't respond to a quarter turn of a steering wheel
perfectly every time, right? Yeah. And this is again like the difference between programmers and roboticists. It's like roboticists have to work in embedded, like embodied systems. And so if you can try this at home, you can try like a small microcontroller programming a series of commands for like a Arduino or a Turtlebot or something. Replay the same commands 20 times, and you see it'll drift over time out of position. Yeah. And so the whole idea of teach and repeat is to correct for those drifts using some sort of localization source. GPS, cameras, markers, whatever. If those markers start to drift as well, then you're really in trouble, right? And then you get off the rails of this visual teach and repeat where you just can't find your way back onto the path.
I mean, there's a system that I know of that drives in a specialty crop environment. So there's obstacles, there's maybe a meter of clearance across the lane. There's obstacles that are roughly, or there's walls that are roughly a meter and a half tall. And then they have people walking in this environment with beacons, and they're using the system to kind of teach and repeat to follow them. Yeah. Where would something like that break down?
So you have to understand if somebody's wearing a beacon, you might have a good understanding of that person's relative position to the robot, but you don't really still have a good understanding of the robot's position relative to the planet. So like, where is it in the field?
Yeah.
It's in a row.
Yeah.
Which row? How far along is the row? Is it right? Like,
yeah. Did it start going down the wrong row, and you can't walk from one row to the other?
Right. Exactly. So you're going to make mistakes like that. You're going to make mistakes like if it's a spraying robot, for example. As it's going along, its localization system decides it's made enough accumulated error that it's actually a few feet further along than it thinks it is. And so it tries to correct that by speeding up, and you underspray a whole section.
Yeah.
You get all sorts of that kind of detail work where, yes, it can theoretically do what you've described, but doing it well and consistently is the challenge.
Yeah. That's interesting. So in other words, teach and repeat stuff really hard in visually complex environments that change, that are outside. So like if visual can work well in a controlled environment like a factory or underground in a mine, GPS stuff can work in places that have GPS as long as you have a lot of tolerance for error.
Yeah. Or you're in a completely open environment. GPS is great for farming. You know, farming community has picked up GPS like crazy. All the tractors have auto steer built into them. Perfect use case. Big open fields.
I guess the question that I have with teach and repeat is, why would you use it? Like when is it best? Like where is it better than other solutions?
Yeah, like underground mines, perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Really, really good there because you have a really challenging localization problem. You have very fixed paths. And you know that if you come up to like the main thoroughfares in a mine will not have obstacles in them. If they do, it's a critical fault. Machinery is broken down, somebody's injured. Like you just got to stop. Inside of factories, even, I think visual teach and repeat won't, or teach and repeat in general, isn't as useful unless it's super rigid, like tape on the floor sort of thing. Modern factories today are starting to become flexible enough that you can't depend on the same process running every single day.
Because sometimes you need to make 25 more widget A's than widget B's.
Exactly.
Which then breaks all your robotic systems if they're that rigid.
Yeah, unless you're Toyota and you're making the same car over and over, right? You need a little bit more flexibility in your factories. And there's this whole term like Industry 4.0. It's kind of going towards this. More flexibility, more feedback, more live adjustment of parts and processes. But yeah, anywhere you have truly GPS denied environments that you know you have a fixed path, that's a good place for it.
I mean, it seems to me like it's also a bet against sensors and compute. Like teach and repeat, like it has a lighter sensor load required.
For sure.
It has a lighter compute load required. So it's kind of a like, let's have a dumber robot that kind of works for now.
Oh, absolutely.
And like and kind of let's get this thing out the door. But it might not make sense when, like, you know, sensors have 10x the compute in 1/10 the cost.
Yeah. And by the way, it also doesn't guarantee any sort of safety, right?
What do you mean?
So teach and repeat, generally, even visual teach and repeat, doesn't understand the concept of an obstacle. So you need another system to notice that there's something in your way and stops you. Because if you look at the algorithms for teach and repeat, fundamentally, they're all kind of a one-dimensional space search to find the closest state that your robot is in along this one-dimensional space of states you've seen before. So in that mathematical representation, you have no concept of an obstacle. It's just disturbance or not disturbance. So you still need a safety system if you're going to deploy a machine with this thing. You still need some way to detect, oh, there's an obstacle. I'm going to switch tracks and go a different path around this obstacle. Again, unless you're in a space without that concern, but that's rare. You gotta admit.
So understanding that teach and repeat's better for when there's a lower budget for compute, a less, let's say, visually vibrant environment around you. When is it the wrong idea? And how does that relate to what we're building?
Yeah.
Or this little company of ours.
Absolutely. So as I said earlier, you know, if you really boil it down, part of what we do is teach and repeat with GPS coordinates. But again, that whole layer of obstacle avoidance, safety, ensuring that you have intelligent behavior and being able to dynamically navigate around stuff. If you really think about defining pathways for robots, you almost get into a kind of an over-constrained state. So if you say, robot A, I want you to exactly follow this path, unless you know all the kinematic limits of that robot, you're going to kind of overestimate or underestimate. And your robot's going to have more trouble following that than if you just told it, go here.
If you kind of loosely say,
go here, right?
Go to the warehouse.
Exactly. And we're trying to educate our customers and work with them to say, don't worry exactly what path your robot takes. Just tell us where you want us to go. And give us hints in the form of no-go zones, one-way zones, general mapping, that sort of stuff, so that the robot finds an optimal path.
Also, because a map like that is very easy to edit. Like we're not talking about we're not talking about an HD map. We're talking about this is a parking lot that people walk through, so really don't drive through here.
Yeah.
And here's a place that no one's ever going to be, so who cares if you drive through there?
Yeah, like take a satellite photo, mouse over a few polygons with your mouse, done.
Yeah.
That level of editing. That lends itself to a more flexible platform, and B also makes it more robust to disturbances, right? Like if somebody steps in front of it, if there's more robots, whatever.
Anyway, this isn't just like how we're building it. Like I'd say most of the good teams in robotics are approaching it this way.
No, nothing I'm describing here is groundbreaking at all, right? The kind of our whole mission is really not to do groundbreaking work. It's to do really reliable, deployable, repeatable work.
And what I think is nice about a more robust system is it lets you be a crappier user of it.
Exactly.
If everything's really rigid, you need to be a really, really smart user of that robotic system, which is why a lot of robotics companies are vertical. Yeah. Because being vertical is a cheat code to build a simpler and crappier robot and still have it be valuable. Whereas if instead you need a flexible, you want kind of anyone to be able to program stuff, including some MBA, you probably need the system to have more intelligence to make up for the shortcomings of that Harvard grad.
Stefan has a much lower view of MBAs than I do, just to disclaim. But yeah, to the wider trend, even on one of our previous episodes when we talked about Intrinsic and Google buying Ross, their whole thing was to get rid of this hard scripting of robot arms to make it more flexible path planning and make it more reactive. In general, that's what we're trying to do too, is make autonomy less of this on rails and more flexible around
more of this like, hey, I really need you to go to this point. Get there, please.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
I don't care
drive through the break room.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Ilya, what are we talking about next week? I don't know either.
I think this is becoming a theme for us in these episodes.
Facial expressions said it all. Yeah, so that's all for this episode of Automate It. We'll be back next week. We certainly will not be having one of us be out of sight, the other one on a business trip, and therefore not recording a solo episode. That will definitely not happen next week because that's what happened last week. Thank you all so much for joining it, and I'll see you soon.
See you next time.